the strongest version of your mind may be built after the version you trusted has collapsed. What breaks you can become the place where you stop living by borrowed beliefs. Loss does not only take something from you, it reveals what was never stable. It isn't the end of your mind. It is the moment you can examine its foundations and rebuild with intention. Here's the truth underneath it. Recovery begins before you feel ready, when you face the ruins instead of waiting for them to become comfortable. Machiavelli recognized that fortune can wound a person without having the final authority to define that person. Your circumstances may strike first, but your response determines what remains standing. By the end, you will see how to face what broke you without allowing it to become your identity, how to strip away the beliefs formed in pain, and how to rebuild discipline where fear once directed your choices. You will learn why healing cannot mean returning to the exact mind that was shattered, but constructing a clearer one with stronger boundaries, sharper judgment, and deliberate control over the next move. Before we go further, write this in the comments: I build from what remains. This isn't for the algorithm, it is a reminder to yourself that the ruins are not your final shape. Now, let's begin. The first task is not to feel whole again. It is to stop pretending that the old structure can carry the weight of the life ahead. Begin by naming what actually broke, not the entire future, not your value, not every possibility that remains. Something specific was damaged: trust, direction, confidence, a relationship, a belief about how life was supposed to work. When pain is left undefined, the mind turns it into an atmosphere. Everything feels ruined because nothing has been separated from the original wound. This is one of the oldest defenses of the mind. It expands one event until the event seems to explain everything. A failed venture becomes proof that you are incapable. A betrayal becomes proof that nobody can be trusted. A loss becomes proof that attachment itself was a mistake. The mind does this because a total explanation can feel safer than uncertainty. If everything is broken, at least the world appears predictable. But is everything broken? Or has one foundation failed and begun sending vibrations through the rest of the structure? What exactly happened, and what did you add to it afterward? What was taken from you, and what conclusion did you volunteer? Watch the language you use when you describe the wound. This destroyed me may be emotionally true, but it can quietly become an identity. Replace it with precision. This ended that relationship. This exposed that judgment. This changed my circumstances. The difference is not cosmetic. It gives the mind edges again. The distinction matters because an unnamed injury spreads through association. A tense conversation becomes evidence about every relationship. One rejection becomes evidence about every room you enter. One mistake becomes a forecast disguised as memory. The mind is not only remembering what happened, it is sorting future experiences into the same category. If you do not name the original damage, every new event can be recruited as supporting evidence. Write down the event in one sentence, then write down the conclusion you attach to it. Keep them separate. The event may be real, painful, and irreversible. The conclusion may still be an assumption. You do not have to argue with the pain to stop granting it jurisdiction. You only have to notice where fact ends and interpretation begins. Machiavelli understood that fortune can enter a life like a force of weather, overturning arrangements that seemed permanent. But weather is not a government. It can damage the city without becoming its ruler. Your first act of rebuilding is to separate the event from the authority you grant it. The goal is not to minimize what happened, it is to prevent pain from becoming a legal system that sentences every future decision. Once the damage has been named, remove the false meaning attached to it. Every collapse carries two injuries: the event itself and the story the mind constructs around the event. The first may be unavoidable. The second must be examined. You may have learned during the worst period that needing people is weakness, that ambition creates disappointment, that softness invites exploitation, or that staying guarded is the only way to remain safe. These beliefs often arrive disguised as wisdom. They sound severe, mature, and practical, yet some are only fear wearing a uniform. The mind prefers a painful rule to an unpredictable world. After betrayal, trust no one feels stronger than learn to distinguish trustworthy behavior. After failure, never try again feels safer than change the method and accept another uncertain attempt. Most people preserve these rules because the rules seem to protect them from surprise. The few who rebuild ask whether the protection has become another prison, so pay attention to the conclusions formed in the immediate aftermath. Which belief helped you survive the first week but now prevents you from living the next year? Which boundary protects your judgment and which wall only protects your fear from being tested? A belief formed under pressure can feel like a permanent law because it once reduced confusion. That does not make it accurate. It may have narrowed your choices precisely when narrowing them was necessary, then remained in control after the danger passed. Ask what the rule costs you now. Ask who benefits when you keep obeying it. Ask whether the belief creates discernment or merely prevents contact with anything uncertain. You do not need to replace every hard conclusion with optimism. Replace exaggeration with proportion. Not everyone is safe, but everyone is not dangerous. One method failed, but effort is not discredited. One person left, but your capacity for connection did not leave with them. This is not positive thinking. It is a refusal to let one fact impersonate the whole world. This does not mean throwing away caution. It means refining it. A clear mind does not return to blind trust. It replaces blind trust with observation. It does not become endlessly open. It becomes deliberate about access. Machiavelli's view of human behavior was unsentimental. Appearances shift, loyalties are tested by conditions, and promises mean less than patterns. That lesson can make you bitter, or it can make you discerning. The difference is whether you use it to condemn everyone, or to observe more accurately. It isn't wisdom to expect betrayal everywhere. It is wisdom to stop ignoring the evidence when betrayal is present. It isn't strength to feel nothing. It is strength to feel the wound without allowing the wound to write every rule. The next foundation is small action before emotional certainty. After collapse, the mind often waits for motivation to return before it resumes authority. That is the trap. Motivation is a visitor. Structure is a residence. You do not rebuild by making one grand promise in the middle of despair. You rebuild by creating a few actions so clear that they can survive a bad morning. Rise at a chosen time. Move your body. Complete the necessary task before negotiating with your mood. Keep one promise made privately. Remove one source of disorder. Sleep at a consistent hour when circumstances allow. These acts may appear ordinary, but they restore the connection between decision and result. Why does this matter? Because failure and betrayal often damage self-trust more deeply than they damage reputation. You stop believing that your choices can produce stability. Each completed action gives the mind a small piece of contrary evidence. Not a dramatic transformation, but proof that your will still reaches the world. Ask yourself, what is the smallest disciplined act that would make today less chaotic? What can be completed without applause, permission, or perfect confidence? What would happen if progress were measured by kept agreements rather than intense feelings? The mechanism is simple but easy to overlook. A promise kept creates evidence. Evidence changes expectation. Changed expectation makes the next promise less burdensome. The cycle does not begin with confidence. Confidence is one of its results. A clean room does not solve grief. A completed task does not erase betrayal. But each act tells your nervous system that the present is not entirely governed by the past. Make the action small enough that excuses become visible. If the task is too grand, failure can be blamed on the size of the plan. If the task is precise, you can see whether you acted or avoided. Do not ask for a perfect day. Ask for one deliberate act before the day becomes crowded with reaction. Most people wait to feel powerful before behaving with discipline. The few use discipline to make power believable again. Do not turn routine into punishment. That simply gives the wound a new uniform. The purpose is not to exhaust yourself until you become impossible to hurt. The purpose is to create a dependable internal rhythm while the larger parts of life are still uncertain. You stop asking whether you feel ready. You stop treating hesitation as a command. You stop demanding that tomorrow prove the entire future is safe. You only ask for the next clear action, and then you perform it. Rebuilding also requires deciding what no longer receives access to your mind. A damaged mind is often crowded with old voices: the person who betrayed you, the audience that judged you, the standard you failed to meet, the imagined version of yourself who was supposed to avoid the pain. Their presence continues because attention has become a form of unpaid rent. Not every thought deserves a hearing simply because it arrives with force. Pain repeats itself to create the illusion that repetition is evidence. The same memory appearing every morning does not mean it contains a new instruction. The same fear returning does not mean it has discovered a new danger. Notice what happens when a thought enters. Do you examine it, or do you obey it automatically? Do you ask whether it is useful, accurate, and relevant to the present, or do you let an old moment take control of a new decision? This is where boundaries become mental, not only social. You may need distance from a person, but you may also need distance from the role you played around that person. The rescuer, the one who tolerated everything, the one who needed to be chosen, the one who needed to be chosen, the one who kept explaining obvious disrespect because accepting it would require a difficult move. Machiavelli advised rulers to understand the forces around them rather than govern by wishful thinking. Apply that inwardly. Identify what repeatedly drains your judgment. Identify the promises you make when lonely and regret when calm. Identify the environments where your standards disappear. It isn't about becoming inaccessible. It is about becoming selective. Not every invitation deserves an answer. Not every accusation deserves a defense. And not every memory deserves another trial. Attention is not neutral. What you rehearse becomes easier to access, and what becomes easier to access begins to feel more important. This is why reopening an old message, replaying an argument, or checking for a reaction can keep a structure standing after you have already decided to leave it. You are not weak because the impulse returns. You are training the impulse each time you obey it. Create a pause between arrival and access. Name the thought. Locate the trigger. Decide whether action is required now. A memory can be acknowledged without being consulted. An accusation can be heard without being answered. A longing can be felt without being converted into contact. Watch the moment you reach for an old source of pain because silence feels unfamiliar. That moment is not proof that you still belong there. It is evidence that the mind is adjusting to the absence of a pattern. Then choose what enters next. The rebuild deepens when you recover the ability to make decisions without asking pain for permission. A person who has been hurt often confuses caution with delay. Every option is analyzed until action feels irresponsible. Every opportunity is compared with the worst previous outcome. The mind calls this preparation, but sometimes it is only fear extending the negotiation. You cannot remove uncertainty from life. You can improve the quality of your judgment inside uncertainty. That means separating facts from predictions, patterns from isolated incidents, and present conditions from old emotional weather. When a choice appears, ask 3 questions. What is known? What is assumed? What is the cost of remaining still? The last question matters because inaction is not neutral. Refusing to choose also shapes the future. It can preserve safety, but it can preserve stagnation as well. What would you decide if you did not need the decision to prove that you were no longer wounded? What would you attempt if failure were information rather than a verdict? What boundary would you set if you were more interested in clarity than in being understood by everyone? The few who recover do not become fearless. They become more precise about what fear is allowed to do. Fear may signal preparation. It may reveal a real risk. It may simply remember an old injury. These are different messages, and they require different responses. Use a decision window when your mind begins circling. Gather the relevant facts. Name the worst plausible outcome. Identify the action that would reduce exposure and choose a time to move. Endless analysis does not create control. It often creates the feeling of control while postponing the responsibility of choice. Preparation should produce a decision, not replace one. Machiavelli's lesson about fortune was not that a person controls every outcome. It was that preparation gives fortune fewer ways to dictate the response. Build options. Keep your skills alive. Preserve your capacity to leave what diminishes you. Make decisions while calm, that your wounded state can follow later. This is not a promise that every choice will succeed. It is a refusal to make helplessness permanent. You are not waiting for certainty. You are building enough judgment to move without it. After that, learn to read people without turning every interaction into a battlefield. Betrayal can distort perception in two opposite ways. It can make you naive because you want to believe the next person is different, or suspicious because you want to ensure nobody can surprise you again. Neither response is clarity. Read behavior across time. Watch how someone treats limits, inconvenience, responsibility, and people who cannot reward them. Notice whether their words become more impressive when their actions become less reliable. Notice whether apologies create change or merely reset access. This is not an invitation to inspect everyone with hostility. It is an invitation to stop letting charm outrank consistency. The person who rebuilds does not ask only, "Do I like this person?" The better question is, "What does contact with this person repeatedly do to my judgment, peace, and standards?" Pay attention to how your body and attention respond after an interaction. Do you feel pressured to explain yourself? Do you leave confused about a simple exchange? Do you find yourself accepting conditions you would reject for someone you love? These signals are not infallible, but they deserve investigation. Most people focus on whether others understand their intentions. The few focus on whether others understand their intentions. The few focus on whether others respect their boundaries. Machiavelli recognized that power often hides inside dependence. The person who controls your access to approval can influence your choices without issuing a direct order. Rebuilding means reducing that dependence. Let your decisions be evaluated by principles, consequences, and evidence, not by the changing temperature of another person. It isn't coldness to notice patterns. It isn't cruelty to limit access. It isn't pride to leave a situation that repeatedly requires you to betray yourself in order to remain accepted. Do not judge a person by one polished explanation or one dramatic apology. Compare what they say when challenged with what they do when no reward is available. Compare their respect for your no with their warmth when you agree. Compare the version presented in public with the conduct that appears under inconvenience. You are not searching for flawless people. You are checking whether the pattern is safe enough for the level of access being requested. You do not need to expose every manipulator, win every argument, or deliver a final speech. Sometimes the clearest response is a smaller presence, less explanation, fewer openings, a boundary that does not require a courtroom. The final shift is from repairing the old self to authoring the next one. This is where many people stall. They spend years trying to return to who they were before the loss, as if the highest form of recovery were restoration. But the earlier self may have lacked the judgment that the wound forced you to develop. You are not obligated to rebuild the same house with the same doors. Some parts of the old identity were genuine. Others were inherited, performed, or maintained because they earned approval. The collapse gives you a difficult advantage. It reveals which parts disappear when the audience leaves. Who are you when you no longer need to be seen as unaffected? What remains when the old ambition, relationship, role, or reputation cannot be used to introduce you? Which values survive the loss and which were only habits attached to it? This is identity through selection. You choose the standards that govern your time. You choose what kind of person receives your trust. You choose whether pain will sharpen your judgment or narrow your humanity. You choose whether strength means domination or whether it means remaining capable of care without surrendering discernment. Machiavelli's strongest image of resilience is not a person untouched by fortune. It is a person prepared to meet changing conditions without losing the center of command. That center is not a mood, it is a set of decisions repeated until they become character. Do not wait for a new identity to arrive as a feeling. Give it evidence through repeated choices. If you value clarity, speak plainly once instead of explaining endlessly. If you value self-respect, leave before resentment turns the boundary into punishment. If you value connection, practice openness with standards instead of using isolation as proof of strength. The identity becomes real when it survives an inconvenient moment. You stop asking the past to return what it took. You stop asking the people who harmed you to certify your recovery. You stop measuring your life by the moment it broke. Instead, you become difficult to move because you know what moves you. You become difficult to deceive because you study patterns instead of promises. You become difficult to destroy because your identity is no longer resting on one fragile arrangement. The mind no one can read or move is not empty of feeling. It is governed by chosen principles rather than exposed impulses. It can remain warm without becoming available to every demand. It can remain alert without becoming bitter. It can remember the ruins without mistaking them for the whole territory. Remember what you saw today. Name the actual damage instead of surrendering to a total collapse. Separate the event from the meaning, pain attached to it. Rebuild self-trust through small, repeated actions. Decide what no longer receives access to your attention. Make choices from evidence rather than fear. Read people through patterns, not promises. Then select an identity that is stronger than the life arrangement that once carried it. You are not required to become cold or suspicious. You're required to become clear. The aim is to recognize fear, dependence, and false meaning when they are directing you, not to use them against anyone else. Awareness should make you steadier, not crueler. A harder mind is valuable only when it remains under your command. The ruins are not proof that you were finished. They are evidence that something unexamined could no longer stand. Let the next structure be built with fewer illusions, stronger boundaries, and decisions that do not depend on being rescued by the past. Remember the words you wrote at the beginning, "I build from what remains." Let that sentence remind you that what remains is not merely what survived. It is the material from which judgment, discipline, and self-respect can be deliberately formed. And while you are there writing it, the pinned comment holds Virtue Pieldi, the Machiavelli doctrine, a complete system for forging a mind no one can easily read or move, with the iron of your own discipline and the crown of wiser people around you. Let the affirmation mark the rebuild, and let the pinned comment show the structure behind it. If this sharpens something in you, subscribe. The next lesson goes deeper. A broken fortress can still become the foundation of an unshakable city.